Don't move!
Hands up!
What are you doing on this property?
This is my property. I'm checking my mail. Look at the address.
Turn around, now! We got a call. You match the description.
The description of what? A black man in his own driveway?
Hands behind your back. Let's go.
You're making a mistake.
The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists, biting into the skin as two officers forcibly pressed his chest against the warm hood of the patrol SUV. A stack of envelopes, glossy magazines, and a package slip fluttered from his grip, landing in the dirt of the expertly manicured flower bed. The return address labels all read the same name, Marcus Sterling. The address on the mail matched the brass numbers screwed into the brick pillar of the driveway gate. Inside the sprawling colonial-style house behind him, a jazz record was spinning silently on a turntable in the den. A freshly poured glass of iced tea was sweating on a coaster in the sunroom. His reading glasses were folded neatly on top of a set of architectural blueprints. He was wearing comfortable weekend loungewear and leather loafers. Yet in the eyes of the law enforcement officers currently twisting his arms behind his back, he was not a homeowner enjoying a Tuesday afternoon. He was a threat. He was a suspect. He was a body that needed to be controlled. All because he had walked 40 feet to the curb to check his mailbox. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to know where you are tuning in from. Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you are new here, please verify that you have hit that subscribe button. We tell the stories that the nightly news often glosses over, and your support helps us bring these realities to light. His name was Marcus Sterling. He was 45 years old, a senior partner at a prestigious landscape architecture firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. He had designed some of the city's most celebrated public parks and corporate gardens. The house was his masterpiece, a 4-bedroom brick estate in the affluent Kingswood neighborhood that he had renovated extensively over the last decade. He had lived there for 9 years. 9 years of paying property taxes that funded the very salaries of the men currently pinning him to his car. 9 years of hosting neighborhood barbecues. 9 years of being a pillar of this specific community. The Tuesday in question began with the typical rhythm of a successful professional. Marcus was up at 5:30 a.m. for a run on his treadmill, followed by a series of Zoom calls with clients in Dubai and London. By 1:00 p.m., the heavy lifting of his workday was done, and he decided to step away from his screens to get some fresh air. He saw the white mail truck pull away from the curb and realized he was waiting for a contract to arrive via post. He slid his feet into his loafers, unlocked the front door, and walked down the long, paver-stone driveway. The sun was high and bright. The azaleas he had planted along the perimeter were in full bloom. It was a picture-perfect suburban scene. Marcus reached the mailbox, a custom brick structure that matched the house, and retrieved a thick bundle of letters. He was sifting through them, a bill, a wedding invitation, a catalog, and had just turned to walk back toward the house when the silence of the afternoon was shattered. A police cruiser accelerated down the quiet street, its engine roaring before screeching to a halt at a diagonal angle across the bottom of his driveway, effectively blocking the exit. Before Marcus could even process the intrusion, a second cruiser pulled up directly behind the first. 3 officers exited the vehicles with a speed and intensity usually reserved for active bank robberies. Marcus froze. He looked up, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. He didn't run. He didn't reach for his waistband. He just stood there holding his mail. Officer Miller was the first to speak, his voice projecting across the lawn with aggressive authority. He demanded to know what Marcus was doing at the residence. Marcus, still holding the bundle of envelopes aloft in his left hand, kept his voice calm but firm. He stated clearly that he was retrieving his mail. He stated that this was his home. Officer Hayes flanked to the left, his hand hovering over the retention strap of his service weapon. This is a tactic known as contact and cover, designed to overwhelm a suspect and eliminate escape routes. But there was no suspect here. There was only an architect standing in his own garden. Hayes asked if Marcus had identification on his person. Marcus shook his head slowly. He explained that his wallet was on the kitchen island inside the house. He pointed to the front door, which was still unlocked. Miller shouted for him to keep his hands visible. Marcus complied immediately, raising both hands to shoulder height. The mail was still clutched in his fingers, the white envelopes stark against the blue sky. Hayes asked for the address. Marcus recited it. He recited the zip code. He pointed to the mailbox where the numbers were clearly visible. Miller asked how long he had lived there. Marcus answered 9 years. Miller asked if there was anyone who could verify that. Marcus felt a surge of indignation rise in his chest. Verify it. The key in his pocket verified it. The mail in his hand verified it. The fact that he was wearing house slippers outdoors verified it. Why was the burden of proof shifted onto him in his own driveway? Hayes radioed dispatch stating they had a subject matching the description of a suspicious individual casing homes in the Kingswood area. Casing homes. The phrase hung in the humid air like a toxic cloud. Marcus realized with a sinking dread that they weren't seeing a neighbor. They were seeing a caricature. This is a reality supported by hard data. According to the Stanford Open Policing Project, which analyzed over 100 million traffic stops and police interactions, Black individuals are policed at significantly higher rates than white individuals. In many jurisdictions, Black people are searched at twice the rate of white people, despite contraband being found on them less often. The presumption of guilt is a statistical anomaly that has become a lived reality for men like Marcus. A door opened across the street. Mrs. Abernathy, a retired school principal in her late 70s, stepped out onto her porch. She had lived in Kingswood since the 1980s. She and Marcus had a standing rivalry about who could grow the best hydrangeas. She saw the police cars. She saw Marcus with his hands in the air. She began to move with a speed that defied her age, hurrying down her driveway toward the street. "Officer! Excuse me, officer!" She called out, her voice shrill with alarm. "That is Marcus Sterling. He lives there. What on earth are you doing?" Officer Miller turned his head sharply. He held up a hand, palm out, ordering her to stay back. He barked that this was an active investigation, and she needed to maintain a safe distance, or she would be detained for obstruction of justice. Mrs. Abernathy stopped at the edge of the curb, but she did not go silent. She yelled that she had known Marcus for nearly a decade. She shouted that he was a partner at a firm downtown. She screamed that they were making a massive mistake. Miller ignored her. He turned back to Marcus and gave the order. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second. The rational part of his brain screamed that this was unlawful, that he should refuse. But the survival instinct, the one passed down through generations, took over. He knew that any movement interpreted as resistance could justify an escalation of force. He knew the statistics. He knew that Black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men. He did not want to become a statistic in his own front yard. He dropped the mail. He turned around. He felt the heavy hands of the officers grab his wrists and wrench them together. The ratchet of the handcuffs echoed off the brick facade of his home. Take a moment to imagine this. You are at your home. You have worked your entire life to afford a safe, quiet existence, and in the span of 3 minutes you are stripped of your autonomy and shackled like a violent criminal in full view of your neighbors. If you think this is an overreaction by police type unjust in the comments section, Officer Miller patted Marcus down his hands, moving roughly over the expensive fabric of Marcus's loungewear. He found the house keys in the right pocket. He pulled them out and dangled them in front of Marcus's face. "We need to verify your ID," Miller said. "Do we have consent to enter the residence to retrieve your wallet?" Marcus closed his eyes. He knew he could say no. He knew he could demand a warrant, but he also knew that would mean sitting in the back of a scorching patrol car for hours while they obtained one, or worse, being taken down to the station for failure to identify or some other trumped-up charge. He just wanted this to end. "Yes," Marcus whispered. "It's on the kitchen island, to the left." Officer Hayes took the keys. He walked up the paver stone path past the blooming azaleas and unlocked the front door. He walked into Marcus's sanctuary. He tracked dirt onto the hardwood floors. He walked past family photos on the mantel. He walked into the kitchen, a space where Marcus cooked dinner for his parents on Sundays. Hayes grabbed the leather wallet sitting next to the fruit bowl. Back outside, Marcus stood leaning against the hood of the car, the metal digging into his hip. Mrs. Abernathy had her phone out now. She was recording. Other neighbors had come out. Mr. Henderson, the investment banker from 2 doors down, stood with his arms crossed, looking pale and disturbed. The young couple who had just moved in across the street were watching from their window, their faces pressed against the glass. Hayes emerged from the house. He walked back down the driveway, flipping the wallet open. He pulled out the Georgia driver's license. He looked at the photo. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the address printed on the card. Marcus Sterling, 1402 Kingswood Lane. Hayes read aloud. Miller took the license. He looked at it. He looked at the house. He walked over to his radio and called it in. Dispatch running a DL, Sterling Marcus, Delta Lima number. The seconds ticked by like hours. The radio crackled back. Subject is clear. No warrants. Valid license. Registered owner of the vehicle in the driveway. Everything matched. Everything Marcus had said was true. Everything the officers had assumed was false. Miller looked at Hayes. There was no look of remorse, no flash of embarrassment, just a nod that signaled the administrative end of a task. Miller walked back to Marcus. Turn around. He unlocked the handcuffs. The metal fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists instantly, the skin red and angry where the steel had pinched him. His hands were shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline crash hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Miller handed him the wallet and the keys. We got a call about suspicious activity. A male subject looking into mailboxes. You matched the description. We have to follow up on every call. You're free to go. I was looking in my mailbox, Marcus said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and relief. I was looking in my own mailbox. Just doing our job, sir, Miller said, already turning away. Have a good afternoon. The officers got back into their cruisers. They turned off their lights. They backed out of the driveway and drove away, patrolling for the next threat, leaving the current wreckage behind. Mrs. Abernathy rushed across the street the moment the cars were clear. She reached out and took Marcus's arm, her own hands shaking. She asked if he was hurt. She asked if he needed water. She told him she had it all on video. She told him she had the badge numbers. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. He bent down and began to pick up his mail from the dirt. He brushed off the dirt from the wedding invitation. He wiped a smudge of mud from the contract. He stood up and looked at his house. It looked the same. The brick was the same. The windows were the same. But it felt completely different. It no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a stage where his humiliation had just played out for an audience. He walked inside and locked the door. He didn't go back to work. He sat in his living room in the silence and watched the sun move across the floorboards until the room went dark. The next morning, Marcus didn't log on to his computer. He put on a suit. He drove to the office of a prominent civil rights attorney in downtown Atlanta. He brought the video Mrs. Abernathy had sent him. He brought photos of the bruising on his wrists. He brought his unblemished record of citizenship and professional success. The attorney, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, was honest with him. She told him that winning a civil rights lawsuit against the police for a detainment that lasted less than 20 minutes and resulted in no permanent physical injury was incredibly difficult. The doctrine of qualified immunity protects government officials from liability for civil damages insofar as their conduct does not violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights. It is a high bar to clear. However, Jenkins said, tapping her pen on the desk, the entry into your home, even with consent combined with the lack of reasonable suspicion for the initial detainment, we have a case, but they will drag you through the mud. I don't care about the money, Marcus said. I care that they put hands on me in front of my neighbors for checking my mail. I care that they walked into my kitchen. Marcus authorized the lawsuit. He also authorized the release of Mrs. Abernathy's video to the press. The story hit the local news cycle on a Monday. By Wednesday, it was national. Architect arrested for checking mail. The video was viewed 4 million times in 48 hours. The visual of a well-dressed black man being handcuffed against a luxury car in a manicured driveway struck a nerve. It stripped away the usual excuses of wrong place, wrong time, or high crime area. The police department released a statement. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection. They stated that officers were responding to a credible report of mail theft in the area. They stated that Marcus matched the description of the suspect, a description that turned out to be simply black male. They stated that the detainment was temporary and procedural to verify residency. They stated that no policy was violated. The 911 call recording was eventually released. The caller was a man driving a delivery van through the neighborhood. He told the dispatcher, "Yeah, there's a guy standing at a mailbox on Kingswood. He's just standing there, looking through the mail. He doesn't look like he lives there. He's wearing sweatpants. He doesn't look like he lives there." That phrase is the crux of the issue. Implicit bias research shows that people are quicker to associate black faces with criminality and poverty. A black man in an affluent neighborhood is subconsciously flagged as an intruder by many observers, regardless of his attire or demeanor. The caller didn't see a homeowner. He saw a disruption to his mental model of who belongs in Kingswood. The internal affairs investigation took 6 months. The result was predictable. The officers were exonerated of any wrongdoing. They had followed procedure. They had investigated a call. They had used reasonable force to detain a subject who was verbally non-compliant by asking why he was being arrested. But the civil lawsuit was a different beast. During the deposition, Marcus's attorney grilled Officer Miller. She asked him to articulate exactly what specific behavior Marcus exhibited that constituted a crime. Miller faltered. He talked about nervousness. He talked about evasive answers. But under scrutiny, he couldn't name a single penal code violation that Marcus had committed prior to the handcuffs going on. The city, realizing that a jury trial would be a public relations disaster given the clarity of the video and the status of the plaintiff, moved to settle. They offered Marcus $150,000. They included a clause that admitted no liability. Marcus rejected the first offer. He demanded a policy change. He wanted the department to revise its protocols for suspicious person calls requiring officers to have actual observing evidence of a crime before initiating a physical detainment, rather than just a caller's hunch. The city fought back. They argued that policy changes couldn't be dictated by a settlement. The negotiation dragged on for another year. During that year, Marcus's life changed. He developed insomnia. When he drove into his neighborhood, his heart rate would spike. If he saw a police car, his hands would sweat. He stopped walking to the mailbox. He got a P.O. box at the post office 3 miles away. He felt like a guest in his own home, waiting for the landlord to kick him out. Finally, a settlement was reached. The city agreed to pay $275,000. They did not admit fault. However, the police chief agreed to issue a department-wide memo reinforcing the requirement for independent corroboration before detaining subjects based on anonymous tips. It wasn't a law change, but it was something. Marcus donated the entire settlement amount to a legal defense fund for indigent youth in Atlanta. He didn't want their money. He wanted his peace back. But he learned that peace once stolen is rarely returned in full. The psychological toll of such encounters is often overlooked. We focus on the physical violence, but the psychic violence is profound. A study in the American Journal of Public Health found that police stops are associated with higher levels of PTSD and anxiety in the individuals, stopped with the effects being most pronounced in those who perceive the stop as intrusive or unfair. Marcus was living proof of this data. He eventually put the house on the market. He couldn't unsee the image of himself handcuffed in the driveway. He couldn't unsee the way the officers looked at him not as a citizen but as a target. He moved to a high-rise condo downtown. It had a doorman. It felt safer, more anonymous. The officers kept their jobs. The caller faced no consequences. The system absorbed the shock and continued to function exactly as it was designed to. So, what is the lesson here? What are we to make of the Wednesday afternoon that upended a man's life? It is easy to look at this story and say, Marcus should have just shown his ID immediately. But that argument misses the fundamental point of citizenship. In a free society, you should not have to carry papers to check your mail. You should not have to prove you are not a criminal just because you stepped outside your door. When we demand total submission from innocent people to appease the anxieties of authority, we are not asking for law and order. We are asking for subservience. The lesson is about the fragility of the rights we think we possess. A mortgage deed does not protect you from profiling. A college degree does not shield you from bias. An expensive zip code does not grant you immunity. The presumption of innocence, that golden thread of the American legal system, is frayed. For many, it does not exist at all. Marcus Sterling did everything right. He worked hard. He bought the house. He followed the rules. And it took less than 30 minutes for the system to remind him that his belonging was conditional. We must understand that suspicious is often just a synonym for unfamiliar or black. Until we challenge that default setting in our own minds, when we see someone we don't recognize, and in the policies of the departments we fund incidents like this will continue. They will happen in driveways, in parks, in coffee shops, and in lobbies. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think twice about what suspicious really looks like, please share it. Awareness is the first step toward accountability. And remember, justice isn't just about what happens in a courtroom. It's about how we treat each other on the sidewalk.